Welcome to this tutorial on how to draw cells in Adobe Illustrator with examples of a cancer cell and a smooth muscle cell. And I'm going to assume that these drawings are for a research figure, so we will be using a 1-column figure width artboard size of 90 millimeters wide, and this just ensures that whatever we draw will easily fit into a figure. The first step to drawing cells is to find good, accurate images as a guide. So one of my favorite methods is to just Google the cell type, such as smooth muscle cell images, and you can see that there are good representations of this long cell with a large nucleus in these microscope images, as well as some drawings that show how it's normally represented. And you can pick your favorite and bring the image back into your Adobe Illustrator file by dragging and dropping the image and pressing embed to make sure it stays connected to your artboard. And you can hold shift while resizing the image from a corner. And you now have a good inspiration image that we'll use to help draft the accurate smooth muscle cell. The next step is to start making the cell shape. And I'm first going to zoom in by using Command+, that's Control if you're on a PC. And I'm going to use the ellipse tool, and I'm going to drag and drop a narrow ellipse onto my artboard that loosely represents the look of these narrow, smooth muscle cells. But an important difference is that this shape doesn't look exactly like a smooth muscle cell. Smooth muscle cells, if I zoom in again, they are much more narrow on the edges. So the next step of this drawing will be to get this cell shape to have tapered edges instead of round edges. And in order to make that shape, I want to point out that this shape is made of 4 vector points. 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is just the center focal point. It's not a vector point. And these allow us to adjust by using the direct selection tool. I can click and move any of these around. I'm doing undo immediately because that's not the cell shape I want. But the point is that there are only 4 points here, and I want to add 2 points that will allow me to adjust one side of this cell. To add points, I want to go to the pen tool, which has the shortcut P. And if I hover on this edge, you see that there's this plus symbol. And if I click, it adds a vector point. I want to go directly below it and click and add another vector point. And I'm going to use the direct selection tool, which again, this just means I want to adjust my individual points. I'm going to hold shift, select both these points, align them. So this is perfectly vertically aligned with this one. And now this gives me the option with this direct selection tool on to hold shift or just select 1 point at a time, hold shift to select 2 points at a time, and adjust what these look like. Now, my favorite way to do this, to maintain a symmetrical cell, is to only select 1 vector point and then use my arrow keys, 1, 2, 3, to click down a few times. I'll then click this other vector point. This is the only vector point selected, and click 1, 2, 3 up on my arrow key. And I'll just go ahead and do 1 more up and 1 more down to get that nice tapered cell shape. Now, if you're trying to follow along and you're saying to yourself, when I use my arrow key, these are jumping halfway across the page, keep in mind that you're going to want to change your preference, your keyboard increment preference, to be smaller or larger depending on how much fine control you want your arrow keys to have. So let's say I wanted this to be much bigger movement as I click, then I'm going to change this. Let's say I change this from 0.1 to 1 millimeter keyboard increment. If I now select using A and then select this point and use my keyboard, you'll see it's a much bigger jump than it used to be. And I will for now keep it at my small adjustment point of 0.1, but that's how you change how far and fast your arrow keys move things. Now that the left side is done, I want to make the right side a perfect symmetrical match, And my favorite way to do this is knowing that there are 2 points perfectly in the center. I can use my direct selection tool, highlight all points to the right of the center, delete them, and now I only have this left side of the cell. I can press V, direct selection tool, to get out, use Command C, Command F, again that's Control if you're on a PC, that will make a perfect copy right on top. And I'm going to use the Flip Horizontally tool, which can also be found under Object, Transform, and Reflect, to get a perfect mirror image where I can then hold Shift, select them, align them, make sure they're perfectly aligned, zoom in, and make sure that they are perfectly overlapped, and I can hold Shift while I drag this across to meet it, and I just want the sides to touch. I want there to be absolutely no white space in between, and I zoom in really close to make sure that's true for this next step, because right now these are not the same. These are just 2 separate objects on my artboard, but I want to merge them into one. To merge them into one, you want to use the Shape Builder tool by selecting both shapes with your selection tool on. Use Shift plus M to get the Builder tool. And you can see that now if I highlight these with this plus symbol, I can drag across that line to build a shape. And this now built a perfectly symmetrical shell shape that I can then use to finish with the color and nucleus design of this smooth muscle cell. For color design, you will want to choose a fill that is not black. You can choose the color by selecting from this panel of options, or you can double click this fill stroke color and pick anywhere along this scale. Maybe you want it to be a pinkish reddish fill for a smooth muscle cell, and then you want to pick the stroke for that cell. You want to pick not only the stroke color, and you probably want to again align it with something that matches more similarly to your other design. So we could pick a stroke color and a stroke width. I usually prefer 0.5 width for the outlines of my cell. And this is looking pretty good. I might now want to also put in that nucleus shape, which takes up this large part of the center, and use the outline color without a stroke as my nucleus color. And then I can select them both, align the center, align to middle, and zoom out and see that I have a decent representative image of a smooth muscle cell. I can select these objects, hold Shift, and scale it up, knowing that I have my scale, strokes, and effects on, so the outline will increase as I drag it up. If I did this a different way with the scale, strokes, and effects off, know that if I drag this, that this would maintain that 0.5 stroke weight. So just a few tips and tricks about once you create a cell, how do you scale it up? And know that this is a very simple way to do the color for the cell, but you can also consider adding gradients by clicking on this and updating to one of these gradients where you can edit gradient and adjust the colors of this gradient to match and adjust how this gradient behaves over your objects. And my other preferred way is if you're going to be doing a lot of illustrations, you can also purchase templates or create your own templates where, for example, I have a biological diagram template that already has a lot of cell types, but they also have this great color template where if I were to just even copy and paste and bring this color template over into this doc, which I actually already have every time I do a template, I've already built myself this color template that I typically use for cells, where if I select this shape and use the eyedropper tool, I can now copy this color design for the outside of my cell, select the nucleus, press I to get the eyedropper, and get this cell looking however I want, and then use Edit Gradient if I want to adjust this cell color any further. And this completes the tutorial on how to draw a symmetrical smooth muscle cell. Now let's move on to draw a cancer cell, which will use my favorite tricks to create an asymmetrical cell drawing. The first step to draw a cancer cell is to go to the Shape menu, select the Ellipse tool, and while holding Shift, click and drag a perfect circle onto your workspace. Next, go to Effect, Distort and Transform, and Roughen to get this Roughen menu. And what this Roughen menu does is you can change the size and make very abstract or apoptotic cells. You can change the detail, so the number of ridges, and you can change whether the points are smooth or corner. For a cancer cell, I recommend choosing between 4 to 5% size, 10 detail, and smooth corners. And for now, let's go and stick to 3, 10, and smooth, and click OK. Press V to get out, and you can now see that you have a nice, rougher cell shape that's asymmetrical and can represent a good cancer cell. And the next step is to choose the color scheme for this cell. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out and go ahead and finish from my color templates. I'm going to pull over this darker brown template. I'm going to select, press I to get this eyedropper tool, and I'm going to just select this lighter brown color, and I'm going to click on the Ellipse tool, hold Shift to get another perfect circle, and I'm going to use this perfect circle with the darker brown to be my nucleus. And so altogether, this has created a very simple but effective cancer cell shape. And we could consider this complete, but I will want to mention that in the properties, you can see that this shape, this asymmetrical shape, has this roughen effect. And if you click on it, you can still go back and adjust this effect. But this also means that if you don't have this selected in your properties to scale this effect, the stroke and the effect, if this was turned off and I were to take this cell and increase its size, you can see that the effect is changing as I change the size. So if you have the effect turned on, make sure that you also have scale, strokes, and effects turned on so that that effect is scaled as you increase or decrease the shape size. If you want to make the effect permanent, you can just go ahead and make a copy, and I always recommend making a copy just so you have the original effect in place. But after you have the copy, you can select the shape with the effect and go to Object, Expand Appearance. Now, expanding the appearance, if you take a look at this object in your Layers panel, you can see that it actually created 2 layers. So if I ungroup this using Command-Shift-G, you can see that it separated out into 1 stroke layer and 1 separate fill layer. And I like to make the step of just using 1 layer that has the stroke and the fill. So I'm going to use the eyedropper tool. I copy this effect, delete this extra outline, and then move this over and do my final centering so that this is one shape and this is one shape and I don't have that extra outline shape. And I can group this and use this as my permanent effect where the effect no longer exists and it won't matter whether I have scale, stroke, and effects selected on or off. That's the end of this cell drawing tutorial. Thanks for watching and have a great day.